Alright, so in our last video we talked about our horizontal shift. So today, guess what? We're talking about a vertical shift. So exciting, very exciting. Okay, I'm going to describe the shift from f of x to g of x. Well, remember, when it's on the outside, we do the exact same of what we think. So this would be a vertical shift on the outside, up 2, right? A vertical shift, you've heard me say this word a lot, okay, in our last couple of videos. A vertical shift will move our midline, all right, and we will say that word all the time, all of the times, okay, a lot this chapter and throughout, or excuse me, this unit and throughout these videos, okay. So let's see what that means, all right. So here we go, we're going to graph two periods of this function. Okay, you want to think about this as having, remember, taken out your GCF. There's a GCF of 1 here, so we can only take out a 1. All right, so the same things apply. Go through, find your important information. Absolute value of 3 is just 3. Period is 2 pi over b. I took out that b value of 1, so 2 pi over 1, which is just 2 pi. My horizontal shift is right pi. My vertical shift now is up 2, and that up 2 changes our midline. Okay, changes our midline. And our intervals, we're doing 2 pi over 4, which is just pi over 2. Okay, so again, to start, alright, to start in our last couple of videos, we've always graphed our midline first. It just so turns out that our midline was our x-axis. Well, now that we have this vertical shift up 2, I'm going to move 1, 2 units up, and now graph that horizontal line. That will be my midline. After that, I want to graph my amplitude. Okay, my amplitude is up 3, so I move 3 units up from my midline. So 1, 2, 3. So that would be at 5. Go down 1, 2, 3. So that's at -1. So my maximum value of my sine will be at 5. My minimum will be at -1. Next thing I want to do is graph my horizontal shift. My horizontal shift was right pi. After that, luckily our intervals are at pi over 2, so that makes our life a lot easier. Don't you just love it when that happens? So this is 3 pi over 2. And you want to keep your units consistent. I'm trying to smush this in a little bit, so mine may be a little bit off, but we're just going to have to battle. Alright, got to battle a little bit. We could just shift it over. Let's use the magic. Go with some magic here. Do some marker magic. Okay, so then this would be 2 pi, 5 pi over 2. 3 pi, 7 pi over 2, 8 pi over 2, whoa, 4 pi. So we got 1, 2, 3, one more. 9 pi over 2, and 5 pi. Okay. So now, alright, I refer to the midline all the time, okay? You know, we always start in our previous examples, alright, our midline has been the axis, okay? When we refer to the midline with sine always started at our axis. Well, now, since our midline, since we had a vertical shift up 2, sine is going to start here. We're going to start on our new midline, which is right at 2, alright? And then, what happens? Up to our amplitude. So we go midline to the max, to the mid, back to the midline, down to our minimum value, back to our midline, up to our maximum value, back to our midline, down to our minimum value, and back to our midline again. Let's see how this goes. Okay, not bad. All right, not bad. And remember now, this goes on forever, and this can go on forever. All right, it doesn't just not restricted to those. Okay, but the most important thing, this new idea of our midline changing, okay, and making sure that we're going back to that midline and not going back to our x-axis. Notice how we did not plot a point on that x-axis, not one. All right, we plotted our points on our new midline. Okay. Here, first thing I want to do, I'm going to take out my GCF of 1. Okay, so my amplitude, absolute value of 2 is just 2. 2 pi over 1, which is 2 pi. Horizontal shift, we're going left, pi over 2. Vertical shift, we got that -1 on the outside, which means I'm going to go down 1. Intervals, 2 pi. Oh boy. Come on now. 2 pi. Wow. 2 pi or not 2 pi? Here we go. 2 pi over 4, which is just pi over 2. Boom. Again, pi over 2. Wow, that's just so much fun. All right, so now, what's our first thing we want to do? We want to plot our midline first. We go down to -1. There's my midline. Draw it. Draw yourself that nice dotted line. Or I'll try to. Okay. Now, what's next? Plot our amplitudes. Amplitude was 2, so there's 1. 2 is my maximum, so that's 1. 1. 1. 2 to the minimum, that's 1, 2, 3, -3. Okay. Plot our horizontal shift. Left pi over 2. Woo! How do you do? Left pi over 2 would make it -pi over 2. Alright, now you'll notice that my interval is just pi over 2, right? Which is very nice. Very nice for us because that means that my next point is going to be 0. The next point after that will be positive pi over 2. The next tick mark. My next tick mark after that is just pi. 3 pi over 2. Pi. Here I am just having so much fun by myself in the math office on a Sunday. What did you do this weekend? You're going to ask, and I'll tell you what I did. I was here having a good time making some videos. Alright, so talking to myself. So here we go. So now we're going to plot, right? So I moved left pi over 2. That was great. Okay, then my interval is pi over 2. Okay. So as cosine starts at our maximum value. So I'm going to start at my maximum value here. Go back to my midline, to my minimum amplitude, back to the midline, to my maximum, back, where? To the midline, to the minimum, midline, maximum. That was awesome, wasn't it? Let's see how awesome it's going to get. When was the last time you said awesome? I don't know. Oh man, can I get some credit for how good that looks? That looks pretty sick. Wow. Alright, I'm just so proud of myself. This next one, guess what? It's a you try it. So your turn to try this one. Alright? I want you to do it. Pause this video. Please, you try it. Don't wait for me to show you the answers. Pause it. I'm about to pause myself here, so pause yourself too. Here we go. Alright, we are back. Hopefully you actually pause it. You better pause that. I hope you pause that. Here's the deal. Don't forget to factor out the 2 here. Alright, factor out the 2 here so you can change that horizontal shift. Okay, remember the first thing you do, amplitude is 1/2, period is 2 pi over 2, which is pi, right pi over 2, up 3, intervals are pi over 4. First thing I did, graph my vertical shift, 1, 2, 3, graph that midline. insert your amplitude of 1/2. 3.5, 2.5. Okay. From there, write pi over 2. Intervals are pi over 4. So pi over 2, 3 pi over 4, pi, etc., etc. All right. Now, plot your points. Remember, sine starts at the midline, goes to your maximum, mid, minimum, mid, max, etc., etc. So let's not forget that what we're actually doing here, okay, what we're actually doing when we are plotting these points, all right? What we're doing is think about this function here. Remember, x down here. So let's say we pick 3 pi over 4. All right, I'm going to input 3 pi over 4 in for x into my function. So y equals 1/2 sine of 2 times 3 pi over 4 minus pi plus 3. Well, 2 times 6 over 4. 2 times 3 is 6 divided by 4. If I reduce that, that's the sine of 6 over 4 gives me 3 pi over 2 minus pi over 4, or minus pi, excuse me. Well, 3 pi over 2 minus pi is 1/2 the sine of pi over 2 plus 3. Okay? Well, what's the sine of pi over 2? The sine of pi over 2 is 1 for my unit circle, plus 3. 1 times 1/2, this is 3.5. So really, this is 3 pi over 4, comma 3.5. Right? And what do we get here? We have 3 pi over 4 and 3.5. So let's not forget that all of these are intervals. Our intervals are our inputs. All right? When we graph at our amplitude or at our midline, that is our output. All right? We're inputting an angle and spitting out or having an output of a ratio. Okay? So all of these things are connected. All right? We're not just coming up with these randomly. If you were to input every angle, you know what you could find out each of these ordered pairs. All right? So that is vertical shift. We have now done horizontal and vertical. Our next day will be a fun one. I hope you enjoyed that lesson. Adios.